Hello. Since during this month we appreciate men in all their glory, I chose to cover one man from my field. This man was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2005 for his discovery which, to this day, saves thousands of lives daily. His name is Barry Marshall, and he, along with his partner Robin Warren, discovered a bacterium called Helicobacter pylori, which is now known to cause inflammation of the stomach lining and also peptic ulcer disease. The story as to how he got to prove his theory is a story of a man fixated on his idea and the validity of his work. Prior to the discovery of Helicobacter pylori, peptic ulcers were thought to be caused by stress. There was a whole industry of medications which were used to treat this condition with no positive outcomes. Ulcers were being treated surgically when they occurred, and many lives were lost as a result of this condition. The whole of the medical community at the time was convinced of this mechanism between stress and ulcers, and would not see it any other way. Marshall's partner, Robin Warren, at the time described a bacterium found in the acid of the stomach, and around that time another bacterium called Campylobacter jejuni was found to cause gastroenteritis and colitis. And both these bacteria looked remarkably similar, so a link between pathology was postulated. Marshall and Warren, along with the research team that first described Campylobacter jejuni, started doing research on Helicobacter pylori. The bacterium was identified, and a causal link between peptic ulcer disease and gastritis, along with this bacterium, was discovered, and as such the research was published. The research was initially ridiculed as the medical community was fixated on the previous hypothesis of stress-related illness, and as such the findings were told that they were either the results of contaminants or that they were completely inconclusive. Despite their earlier research and the identification of these organisms and the growth of these organisms in petri dishes, they were unable to reproduce their findings on other animal models. As a physician, Warren was already treating patients with positive outcomes, but the community still required further evidence. Although the bacteria were grown on petri dishes, Warren was still unable to reproduce the infection in other animals. As such, frustrated with his research, he ingested a petri dish of cultured Helicobacter pylori, and within days he gave himself gastritis and then ended up reversing the process by treating it with antibiotics. He was the first observed animal study of this bacterium, and along with other people who were reporting similar results, managed to sway the medical community in order to change its mind with regards to the causative mechanism of peptic ulcers. At present time, H. pylori has been found to affect approximately 50% of all humans, and in those humans only a small percentage of them have gastritis, and a smaller percentage have ulcers, and an even smaller percentage have gastric cancer. The discovery of this organism and the eradication methods of simple combination antibiotic therapy and proton pump inhibitors have prevented countless of deaths. At this point, I want to read from his biography on the Nobel Prize website. Check out for the link in the description below. 1984 was a difficult year. I was unsuccessfully attempting to infect an animal model. There was interest and support from a few, but most of my work was rejected for publication, and even accepted papers were significantly delayed. I was met with constant criticism that my conclusions were premature and not well supported. When the work was presented, my results were disputed and disbelieved, not on the basis of science, but because they simply could not be true. It was often said that no one was able to replicate my results. This was untrue, but became part of the folklore of the period. I was told that the bacteria were either contaminants or harmless commensals. Becoming increasingly frustrated with the negative response to my work, I realized I had to have an animal model and decided to use myself. Much has been written about the episode, and I certainly had no idea it would become as important as it has. I didn't discuss it with the ethics committee at the hospital. More significantly, I didn't discuss it in detail with Adrienne, his wife. She was already convinced about the risk of this bacteria, and I knew I would never get her approval. This was one of those occasions when it would be easier to get forgiveness than permission. I was taken by surprise by the severity of the infection. When I came home with my biopsy results showing colonization and classic histological damage to my stomach, Adrian suggested that it was time to treat myself. I had a successful infection. I had proved my point. This man knew what needed to be done. Faced with adversity and ignorance, he took the risk to himself in order to prove a point. Knowing the risks and frustrated with the burden of proof, he had to act in order to prove himself right and also in order to gain wider acceptance on his research in order to save more lives. Though this man was married, he acted against what would have been his wife's advice because this was something that was important to him. Feelings and ethics did not play a role in his decisions. This would have been for the good of humanity, and he did what needed to be done. Once he proved his model, he never looked back. Thanks to this man and his partner and the many others who carried on his research and published their findings, at present the medical community widely accepts this research, the association of Helicobacter pylori and peptic ulcer disease, as medical fact, and treats people in order to prevent the development of the disease. Due to this man's work, hundreds of thousands of lives have been saved and will be saved. Cancers have been prevented, and what used to be a very dangerous disease is now understood better and treated in a much more humane way. Thank you for listening.